Welcome to Silver Bar Stacker, folks. I hope everybody's doing well and enjoying their Stack Pack Sunday. That's right, folks. Today is Stack Pack Sunday here at SBS, and I'm very excited to get into the details about today's SBS drop. But before we do that, I think it's time to just sit back and just have a little bit of a discussion. It's been a while since we've done that at SBS. I feel like it's always kind of we're just straight to business, get straight into the ideas of the drop, and we don't take a time to just sit down and have a chat. And so I thought let's just take a little bit of time and choose a topic and digest it rather than going all nerdy and doing a deep dive on 1985 prospectors or something crazy like that. Not every video has to be a lecture or something like that. So I thought let's just have an open discussion and talk about just something easy to talk about, something that is on the back of everybody's mind when they're stacking or they're collecting. And this is something that we probably all thought about, and the topic is right here up on the board. It's pressed report, and so subject says it all. And so, why don't you just go ahead and start by mentioning here in the comments whether you're into more pressed stuff or port stuff when it comes down to collecting silver, gold, or any precious metals. Now, here at Silver Bar Stacker, of course, we're a huge proponent of stacking silver, and so when I talk about pressed versus port, I'm primarily talking about silver, but that kind of goes for any of the metals that you collect, right? If you're a gold stacker, that's still something to be thought about. Now, when you kind of get into poured gold pieces, those start to get quite expensive, but regardless, I know people out there. I've seen, for example, Savage Stacker out there. I've seen him. He's got this cool little square-shaped button. It's a poured little gold button, 1 ounce gold button. Super cool, right? So there are people out there who do collect poured gold, right? I mean, I've got a pretty cool poured gold bar as well. I really like it. That's probably my favorite piece that I have in my entire collection. But by and large, when it comes to gold, I'm primarily stacking pressed stuff. I'm not really too much into the poured gold. I would say I have a lot more poured silver pieces than I have poured gold pieces, and I just have a lot more silver pieces in general than gold pieces. But when it comes down to poured gold, I have very few. I think I might only have just a single poured gold piece, and the rest are pressed. When it comes down to silver, I've got quite a few poured pieces. I've got right here, you can see silver poured pieces, and I've got several more. I would say most of the poured stuff that I try to collect, it kind of falls into the more rare category, like this one right here. This is kind of like a one-off ingot here by the Bunker Hill Company, and so that's like a very rare, very difficult to find ingot. There's not one really like it out there. It's got its own unique serial number. So this is number 83. So things like this, when it comes down to poured pieces, I'm willing to pay the premium for something that's truly special. And when it comes down to poured vintage pieces especially, you can really go down a deep rabbit hole, and things get really pricey especially when it comes down to the poured category of things in vintage silver and just vintage in general. So because of that, I personally shy away from going too hard on collecting poured stuff. When it comes down to vintage, you know me, I love my vintage, right? And I don't really stack a whole lot of generics, so that's kind of like my personal stacking strategy. A lot of people go pretty heavy on generics, and when you stack generics too, you kind of got options too, right? Like this is some Jaeger poured silver right here. So I mean, the Jaeger poured silver, of course there's a premium attached to it because it's poured silver, and any poured silver really is going to have a premium attached to it, and honestly any silver generally is going to have a premium attached to it. But I would say poured silver generally has a little bit of a higher premium attached to it, but you will have poured silver kind of coming in different tiers, right? So you have like the super rare poured vintage that's extremely hard to find, that will be really pricey, and then you might have something that's maybe a little more of a modern pour that might not be as crazy expensive, maybe as high premium, but still comes with a premium. And then you might have stuff that you have people like YPS that are they make a living off of selling poured silver, and they sell it in high volume. So think about like a store like AppMex or SD Bullion, who's kind of buying wholesale and reselling a lot of units in high volume at kind of lower margins, right? Well, same goes for people who are pouring their own silver and selling it at kind of like, I wouldn't say an industrial level or a commercial level, but kind of like at a large scale, right? If they're doing it high volume, they can afford to kind of keep their prices a little bit lower. And so I'm not going to say that, the YPS stuff is cheap. I'm not really super familiar with this stuff or really super familiar with their prices because I don't buy a lot of it. But just generally speaking, I would say it's reasonably priced, right? It's not going to cost you as much as a Bunker Hill ingot, for example, right? But by and large, I would say that there's a little bit of a larger premium attached to poured silver, and because of that, the cheap person in me kind of shies away from going too hard on it. I would say when it comes down to stacking, I generally try to stack. Like when it comes to stacking duplicates and actually stacking silver, I kind of go more for the pressed stuff. And even when it comes down to the more highly collectible stuff, like when we're talking about the the more rarer pieces, I still like to go for the pressed stuff. And sometimes that stuff comes at a crazy high premium too. Like check this one right here. This is a Goldway Assa Refiner's Bar. It's a little fractional. I just like the fracks first of all, and I just like little unique pieces like that. And yeah, they carry a premium, but I don't care. Sometimes I just buy them anyways because I like them and I think that they're cool. And I think a lot of pressed bars are cool too, right? So poured bars will have their own kind of inherent beauty. They'll have their own unique imperfections, and each one is kind of different in their own way. And some could make the argument that all pressed bars look alike, and that's not entirely true, right? There's a whole when it comes down to collectors and pressed bars, there's a whole just like poured bars, there's errors, there's all sorts of there's different types of varieties of pressed bars, right? Like here you're looking at some Engelhard bars, there's like 4 or 5 different types of just the common E logo bars, right? And we've gone through that in a different video. So when it comes down to you satisfying your urge as a collector, I think that you can't go wrong with either poured or pressed, right? There's nothing wrong with either of them. And so when I'm trying to, when you're trying to stack generally, right, whether you're going for the more collectible stuff or if you're always trying to stick to the more cheaper generic stuff, well, at the end of the day, you are always trying to, get the best value. You want to be satisfied with the things that you purchase, right? You want to be happy with your purchase, but you want to also kind of get as good of a value as you can, right? And so if you're kind of going hard on poured, you're probably not getting a crazy good value. You might be happy with the stuff that you end up with, and you might be happy to hold these pieces because you might be like, oh yeah, this is cool, right? So I like, for example, these 3, little modern pours here. I love these oval. These are probably one of my favorite. These aren't even vintage. These are kind of produced more in the 2015, 2016 era, and so they say Engelhard Australia, but they're actually more of a modern pour, right? They're not one of the vintage bars from the 80s, and so they kind of have a more clean finish to them and a smooth finish. I love this bar. It's very, very nice, right? It's a very fun bar to hold, right? They're just fun bars to hold, these poured bars, right? These 3 are outgoing. Somebody just bought all 3 of them because they just like me, they just like to stack duplicates, so they wanted to probably have a few pocket pieces. But these little fun poured pieces, they're fun to hold. It's a little half-ounce chunker. I mean, this is so much more satisfying than maybe like a half-ounce pressed bar or something like that, right? I like these little A-Mark poured ingots. How cool are these, right? These are so nice. Little stacker, they stack on top of each other. I love how these things just stack on top of one another. So to me, I like the poured stuff a lot. I love it. I would say, arguably I like it more than the pressed stuff. It's really fun to hold this stuff. But when it comes down to it, I would say I'm more of a pressed. When it comes down to stacking, and when it comes down to truthfully being honest with myself about how much stuff that I have in my stack and where it kind of falls, I would say whether we're talking about me being a collector, whether we're talking about me being a stacker, I tend to stick towards the pressed bars. Let me know what you think. Now, I'm coming on that basis. I think that conclusion is true. I think that's true when it comes down to what I do, and I would say that that's because when it comes down to practically what I actually do in a real life situation, I would say I'm always buying pressed stuff. I'm always in the market of buying pressed stuff. Yes, I'm always selling pressed stuff as well. But I would say that I'm not frequently or commonly buying poured stuff. If I come across some cool poured pieces, then I might be like, oh yeah, I might go for that. Especially if it's at a pretty decent premium, I might be like, yeah, I might go for that one of those. But I'm not regularly buying poured stuff, right? So that's what it comes down to. And I think because of that, and because I'm also regularly selling stuff, like these three are outgoing, right? So I'm selling poured stuff, right? I have a couple of these skull rounds going out as well. So that means I'm actively selling poured stuff. I'm actively selling things like prospectors or e-logo bars. I'm actively selling pressed stuff. I'm actively selling poured stuff, but I'm not actively buying poured stuff all the time. But I am actively buying pressed stuff all the time. I'm always restocking or stacking for myself pressed stuff, right? Because that's usually the cheapest stuff. You're usually buying generic rounds, generic bars. That's just, or even if they're not generics, you're usually just buying like normal press bars. But I know some collectors out there. I know like Daddy Silverbucks, for example. He does have some pressed bars. I will say that he has some pressed bars, but he loves the poured bars, and he goes pretty heavy with the poured bars, and he doesn't shy away from like them needing to all be the same size or anything. He's got all sorts of bars, right? They might all be the same weight, but they're all kind of different sizes, and so he just figures out a way to kind of fit them into his box. So some people prefer that, and some people like the collectability of the poured stuff. I know like Scully, for example, when he was really into vintage silver, he was all about the poured ingots. And I know most people, especially when it comes down to vintage people, they're more into the poured stuff. But I think certain people agree with me, like I know Silverstruck agrees with me, that the pressed stuff is underlooked, right? The pressed stuff is slept on, I think, sometimes. Not slept on in the sense that nobody buys it. I would say a vast majority of people buy pressed stuff. But when it comes down to collectible stuff, especially like vintage stuff, then I think the pressed stuff is slept on a little bit. Because that's a little bit more accessible. It's, I'm not saying it's always cheap, right? There's some pressed stuff out there that's just as expensive as poured stuff. Just as expensive, in some cases more expensive than the poured counterparts. Literally. That is true. There is some really, really expensive pressed stuff out there. However, you also have a lot of more accessible pressed stuff, right? Even your kind of common P-loaf bars and stuff are pretty high premium, whereas you can kind of get some of the more pressed bars for a little bit cheaper, a little bit of a more digestible premium. And then you've got your crazy, crazy rare, very, very low mintage pressed bars as well. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But I would say I tend to collect, I tend to stack pressed bars all the time. And I only periodically am stacking and collecting poured stuff. So with that said, today's SPS drop is actually going to be related to what I'm frequently selling, and that's the poured stuff, right? And so today I've got a pretty fun one. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to kind of try to make this drop a little bit accessible for each of the different types of stackers, right? So some people are just kind of stacking a little bit small. They might just stack maybe a couple $dozen at a time, and you got other stackers who might want to be stacking a couple $100 at a time, want to go a little bit heavier. And so I thought, since we're going to be focusing on poured pieces, it's kind of going to be a little bit more fun pieces. Premiums will be a little bit higher, but I'm trying to keep them as reasonable as possible. So we're probably not going to have any like Engelhard Australia modern pours in this drop, for example, or any, one-off Bunker Hill ingots. However, I was thinking, I've got a couple of these cool Jaeger poured pieces that are kind of one-offs that I picked up, and so I thought, these are kind of some cool little nuggets that would be cool to have you guys have a chance to win. And there's always people interested in picking up some of these cool little toned skull rounds. I just love these. They've got a nice little artificially toned in this like bluish purplish toning. So I really love these odd weight fractional rounds. They're kind of marked there as well with the purity and the weight and stuff on the back. So these fractional skull rounds kind of weigh between like 3 to 5 grams. Most of them are around kind of the 4.5 range. Some of them are like 3. As they get as low as 3, and I think nothing is 5. So they're all kind of under 5 and above 3. So anyways, these skull rounds are pretty cool little ingots, fractional ingots. And they've been pretty popular in the store, I would say. I've got a few orders of these kind of going out this week, just from the general store sales. And I think we run these for about $10.99 a piece. right now, and that's free ship, right? Everything on the store is free ship, by the way. For those who aren't familiar with the silverbarstacker.com website, everything that you can purchase there is free shipping. That's why there's nothing that costs like $1, because, you know, even if you're shipping something with a stamp and envelope, it wouldn't, it costs like $1. So, so everything is free ship, and so that's why, you know, it seems like a lot for maybe like a, 4 or 5 gram round for $10.99, but that's kind of what the price is when you factor in the shipping and stuff like that. But anyways, what I'm thinking about doing for this drop is you'll have a chance to get some of these skull rounds, and we'll discount that a little bit. And then you also have a chance, if you are a little ape and you ape multiple units for this drop, and you are quick at doing so, then you'll have a chance to grab some of these cool Jaeger poured silver pieces, right? So I've got 2 little half-ounce nuggets here, and these are little rectangular nuggets, poured nuggets, and these are half-ounce each of 0.999 fine silver. So that's pretty cool. I've got 2 nuggets up for grabs, and then I've also got this discontinued. They don't make these anymore. This is a little hexagon-shaped pour with a turtle on it, and this thing is actually a full troy ounce, 999 fine silver, and it's actually serialized with number 18. So this is a pretty cool 1 ounce collectible Jaeger poured silver piece right here that you can't really find anymore. They must have done like a limited run of these, and this is number 18. And you can't really, I don't think they sell them anymore on their website. They must have sold out of the run. So if you want a chance to grab one of these, you're going to have to find out how to do that. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to have to be quick on the drop, right? So the way that this week's drop works is that there's going to be 30 total slots available. It's a free-for-all, right? And you're only allowed to get a maximum of 20 slots, right? So it could just be like 2 people. One person gets 20 slots, another person gets 10 slots, boom, done. The drop is over, right? But there's 30 available slots that are up for grabs. Each person can do a maximum of 20, okay? Now, if you grab just like, each slot, by the way, costs $10, right? So if you just grab a single slot, you would just get a random odd-shaped, odd-sized skull round. Each slot usually gets you kind of just $10, gets you a skull round. Okay, so this one right here is exactly 4 grams. So $10 gets you a 4-gram fractional skull round. Okay, now how the heck do you get one of these Jaeger poured pieces then? Well, you got to be a little ape, right? You can't just, dibble dabble in this week's SBS drop. You got to be fully supportive of this week's drop. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to get a single skull round. No, I'm going to get 2 single skull rounds. No, you got to be a little ape, right? And so in order to be able to claim one of these little nuggets, you can't just buy 1, you can't just buy 2. You got to go and be a little ape, and you got to buy 10 full units, right? And if you buy 10 units of this drop all in one shot, that's going to give you 9 skull rounds. So these 9 skull rounds that you see here, the first one, second one, third one, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, the first 9 units that you purchase will get you these 9 skull rounds, and then the 10th unit that you purchase, as soon as you officially purchase that 10th unit, you will get one of these Jaeger poured silver pieces. But if you are the absolute first person to do so, claim 10 slots, you are going to get this poured hexagon. Pretty cool, huh? So that's nice. This is a full ounce, right? So instead of a 10th skull round that's like 3 to 5 grams, you're going to get a 10th piece that is a full ounce. Okay? You got to be quick on the draw. You got to be the first person to claim at least 10 units from this week's drop, and then you will be able to claim this hexagon, poured hexagon. Okay? Now, the consolation prizes, as I guess you could call it, the second and the third person who grab 10 units, or let's say the first person who grabs 20 units, the first person who grabs, if somebody grabs 20 units straight off the bat before anybody else grabs anything, they will grab both this as well as this, one of these, right? So for every 10 units that you purchase, you're going to get at least, one of these Jaeger poured square silvers. If you're the absolute first, you're going to get this. You're going to get the hexagon. If you're second or if you're third, then you'll get one of the half-ounce consolation nuggets, right? And if you don't want to be a little ape and you don't want to ape, 10 or 20 units, that's fine too. Then in that case, you'll just get, the number of skull rounds that you got units for, right? So if you bought 8 units, then you should get 8 skull rounds. If you bought 4 units, you get 4 skull rounds. So that's kind of how that works. So time is money, and if you're not first, you're certainly last for this week's drop. So now that you understand the rules, if you are interested in claiming one of these slots, feel free to go ahead and grab it. Now this one, the premiums are a little bit high, of course, because it's poured silver, and on top of the fact that it's poured silver, it's primarily fractional silver. So you're kind of getting double premiumed here when it comes down to this drop. But with that said, why do we stack poured silver? Because we think it's cool. We think it's fun to hold, and we just have a fun time looking at it and playing with it. And so I think that's kind of the argument behind poured silver, right? Something that I remember Silverstruck saying was that when you got poured silver pieces, you don't have to hesitate to touch them with your bare hands. It's not really an issue, right? When you've got pressed bars, look at this. Every single press bar here, I've got them put in flips. It may not be technically necessary to do so, but I just do that because I don't like to get my fingerprints all over my press bars. So whenever I can, I like to either put them in flips, put them in capsules, and so they're a little bit more high maintenance, right? Your press stuff. So maybe that's kind of an argument against press stuff. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this discussion on press versus poured. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you agree with kind of some of the arguments I made maybe for pressed, and maybe if you're kind of into the poured stuff, tell us maybe what reasons you're into the poured stuff. Why are you a bigger proponent of the poured stuff over the pressed? Or maybe if you're into the pressed stuff like I am, maybe there's some reasons why you like the pressed stuff that I didn't mention, and so why don't you mention those in the comments as well, so that other people can hear as well and read those as well. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Hope you guys can get involved in this week's poured silver drop, and if not, no worries, we'll have something maybe less collectible-y and more stacky next week. Cheers!